the path through which the Buddha realized the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. When the Buddha left his family to seek liberation for all beings from suffering, he went to study with two renowned meditation teachers. The first teacher, Alara Kalamar, taught the Buddha about the four jhanas, the meditative absorptions of the form realm. The Buddha, being an exceptionally intelligent student, learned quickly. Before long, the teacher asked him to stay and teach because his understanding had equaled that of the teacher. However, the Buddha, still Prince Siddhartha Gautama at that time, declined and said that he had not yet achieved his goal. He then left this teacher to study with the second teacher, Uddaka Ramaputa. This second teacher instructed the Buddha in the four formless jhanas, more subtle and harder to attain than the previous jhanas. Again, the Buddha proved to be an outstanding student, and his teacher asked him to stay and instruct the other disciples. Once more, the prince refused because, even after attaining the highest jhana, he still found suffering and defilements present when he emerged from meditation. Seeing that Uddaka Ramaputa had nothing more to teach, the prince knew he had to seek the truth on his own. He parted ways with his 5 ascetic companions who chose to stay for the stability and assurance of a famous teacher. When the prince reached the Bodhi tree in what is now known as Bodh Gaya in northern India, he made a great resolution. He vowed to sit there without moving until he attained liberation, even if his flesh and bones would disintegrate. Thus he sat and used his meditative abilities to enter deep states of concentration, from the first jhana to the 8th and back again. While sitting, Mara, the tempter, came to entice him, but he overcame it. When his mind was completely pure, tranquil, and unwavering, he attained the deepest enlightenment. Upon emerging from his meditation, he realized that the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path were an internal reality fully understood. After these realizations, he knew he had become the Buddha, the fully enlightened one. In the joy of liberation, the Buddha felt gratitude towards the Bodhi tree that had sheltered him. He stayed there for a month, and then, at the urging of Brahma Sahampati, decided to spread his teachings. Initially, he feared that his teachings were too profound and difficult to understand, and that he might be disappointed by people's inability to grasp them. Eventually, he agreed to teach for the benefit of both humans and devas, heavenly beings. First, the Buddha thought of his teachers, but upon using his divine vision, he discovered that they had passed away. He then decided to teach his 5 former companions. Finding them near Benares, he walked the entire way as he did for the 45 years of his ministry. The Buddha never used animal-drawn carts, as he never wanted to cause suffering to any beings. Thus, one of the monastic rules is to avoid using animal-drawn vehicles. In those times, walking was his mode of travel. Every day the Buddha taught, which is why today we have such a vast legacy of his teachings with over 17,500 discourses. When he neared Benares, the 5 ascetics saw him approaching. They said to each other, "Look, Gautama is coming. He has abandoned his ascetic practices. He is no longer a monk. Look how healthy and clean he looks. Let us not greet him." But as the Buddha came closer, they couldn't hold to their resolve because of his dignified demeanor and radiant face. They greeted him respectfully. The Buddha told them, "I have become enlightened and will teach you my doctrine." Surprised, they asked, "But how do we know this is true? How can you prove it?" The Buddha replied, "You have known me for over 6 years. Have I ever deceived you in any way?" They said, "No." Then the Buddha said, "Listen to one of my teachings." The ascetics agreed, giving him a chance. They prepared a place for him to sit in the deer park at Isapatana, near Benares, and stayed with him for a week, taking turns to go for alms. Then the Buddha began to deliver his first sermon after enlightenment, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on turning the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha set the Dharma wheel in motion with this first sermon, and fortunately, it still turns today. Throughout history, there have been times of decline, such as in Sri Lanka, where there were no monks at all. The Dharma has often been threatened and opposed because it goes against human instincts, flowing against the current, against the stream. When the Buddha concluded the sermon, one of the 5 ascetics attained realization. The Buddha said, "Anatta Kondana sees, Anatta Kondana knows, seeing and knowing. Mere knowing is not enough. Seeing is the insight into the true nature of the mind that transforms one's entire perspective. Anatta Kondana became the first arahant and also the first monk of Buddhism. The Buddha is also called an arahant. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. He is both an arahant and a Buddha. The difference is that the Buddha discovered the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path by himself, without a teacher, while an arahant attains enlightenment through following the Buddha. When the Dharma is no longer present after many eons, another Buddha will arise to rediscover the same teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. The Buddha possesses the unique ability to teach the Dharma, a rare capacity. There are also Pacceka Buddhas, silent Buddhas, who attain enlightenment but do not have the ability to teach. When we read the scriptures, we are often struck by the Buddha's frequent repetition of certain words. Even though they sound melodious in Pali, the repetition may make us wonder why. However, it is not surprising. In speech, repetition is common. Moreover, the Buddha recognized the difficulty of grasping profound truths through hearing alone. Hence, he emphasized by repeating them. The Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths begin with the truth of suffering. The 5 friends to whom the Buddha delivered his first sermon were ascetics who had practiced severe austerities for 6 years. The Buddha had also engaged in such practices, but realized that self-mortification did not lead to enlightenment. Conversely, the life of indulgence he had lived as Prince Siddhartha in the palace also failed to bring happiness. The Buddha recognized that there was only one path, the middle way. Extremes are never beneficial. These ascetics understood the physical suffering involved in self-mortification, so the Buddha did not need to emphasize this aspect. They could grasp it easily. For us, it is not as simple. Even though we may experience physical pain and discomfort during meditation, once the session ends and we return home, the pain dissipates. Such temporary discomforts are bearable. What we may not realize is that the body itself is a source of suffering, not just in moments of distress, but inherently. The body itself is suffering. Caring for the body is suffering. Here we are not just talking about the suffering that comes from specific misfortunes. Misfortunes are one thing, but the reality of suffering is another. The Buddha said, birth is suffering, aging is suffering, decay is suffering, not getting what one wants is suffering. These are the significant sufferings of all beings, alongside the numerous other forms of suffering related to birth, aging, illness, and death. Clearly, when we are joyful and stable, we do not recognize the suffering within us. We might pity others and feel relieved that we are not in their situation, forgetting that suffering is always present within us. Even in moments of joy, we suffer because we cannot sustain our happiness. Pleasures disappear just when we wish to hold on to them. Each time we cling to them, they slip away, and we have to search for them again. Our bodies cannot sustain themselves without constant nourishment, cleansing, exercise, and medical care. So many treatments, glasses, teeth, hearing aids, supplements, cough medicine, shampoo, and more. We spend so much money just to keep our bodies functioning, let alone improving them. We cannot make our bodies younger, despite the efforts of many. We expend considerable energy, resources, and wealth just to maintain our bodies. Without this effort, the body deteriorates, becoming unusable. The fact that our bodies do not respond to our wishes to stay young, healthy, beautiful, and long-lived, but instead do the opposite, can also be considered suffering. The greatest suffering of the body is its constant demands, sometimes requiring us to spend our entire lives trying to satisfy them. All the wealth we accumulate, all the energy we expend, is primarily to keep our bodies safe and comfortable. We work hard for food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. Without the body, we would not have to toil so hard. Yet, many people spend even more time and money to make their bodies more comfortable and luxurious. This might be the greatest suffering of all, wasting one's life on such goals. But it is not just the body that suffers. The mind also suffers. The mind does not follow our commands. It does what it wants, rather than staying still as we wish. It constantly thinks about things that make us suffer. If that is not suffering, then what is? It is also deluded, which is another form of suffering. The mind jumps from one thing to another. Even the process of thinking is a form of suffering. Even when thoughts are wise or skillful, as they often contain seeds of impurity. As long as we have to think about anything, we cannot truly have peace. Both the body and the mind are suffering. The Buddha said there is only one cause, one primary reason for our suffering, and that is craving, desire. There are three main types of craving from which all other desires stem: the desire to live, the desire to satisfy sensual pleasures, and the desire to rid oneself of this body. Because of these three desires, we are immersed in suffering, as they are beyond our reach. They are hard to achieve and do not bring true satisfaction. We are in a battle we cannot win, and that is suffering. We fight to remain forever, but no one continues to exist after their life ends. To achieve sensual pleasure, we must work just as hard, but it is futile, as worldly pleasures are temporary and fleeting. They cannot last. The third desire, the wish to rid ourselves of this body, is the opposite of the desire to live. This arises when life appears too bleak. But this is also hard to realize, as except for the enlightened ones, no one can exist without a body. The first two truths of the Four Noble Truths show that we are living lives without true meaning. No matter how noble our thoughts are, they will decay. If we see clearly that our desires are difficult to satisfy, we must find a way to escape the suffering that everyone endures. No one is exempt. Understanding this, we develop compassion for everyone, whether they are wicked, detestable, or ignorant. There is no escape, but there is a path to freedom. The path to freedom leads inward. If we contemplate, we will see that we cannot find anything outside ourselves. Most people seek solutions outside through better conditions, better people, fewer tasks, and less suffering. If we can see how futile this is, we will no longer seek externally. Instead, we will turn inward, gradually leading to the third truth, the cessation of suffering, called liberation. The Buddha did not explicitly explain what liberation is. He said what it is not. He knew that explaining it would be futile because until people experience liberation, they cannot understand it. But he could say what is not liberation so that at least people would not seek it in the wrong places. The following story illustrates this idea. Once, a fish and a turtle were friends. They had lived together in a pond for a long time. One day, the turtle decided to explore the land around the pond. The turtle saw many beautiful and strange things to tell his friend, the fish, about. The fish was intrigued and asked the turtle what the land was like. The turtle replied that it was beautiful. The fish wanted to know if everything on land was transparent, cool, shiny, smooth, slippery, and wet. When the turtle answered that the land had none of those qualities, the fish said, "Then the land must not be very good." The Noble Eightfold Path, the path leading to the cessation of suffering, to freedom and liberation, is the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Like the other teachings of the Buddha, the Noble Eightfold Path is based on three main parts: ethical conduct, sila; mental discipline, samadhi; and wisdom, panna. The Noble Eightfold Path should be regarded as a path with 8 interconnected aspects, all of which need to be practiced simultaneously rather than sequentially, as one might climb a ladder step by step. The Noble Eightfold Path can also be seen as a circular movement because it begins and ends with right view. Although right view is mentioned at the start, the culmination of following the Noble Eightfold Path must also result in right view. One right view. Right view is the first step because initially, we must clearly see that there is nothing more we can do in this life than to seek the path to liberate ourselves from suffering through spiritual principles. Thus, it is imperative to find the correct principles that help us understand what we have been doing wrong. Our obstacles are suffering, disappointment, anxiety, and a sense of incompleteness. There is a void in our hearts that we try to fill with one or more people, with thoughts, with work, or with hope. Ultimately, nothing fills it. When a principle can explain why we are troubled and show us how to eliminate our troubles, leading to peace, those principles must be very reliable. Moreover, the teachings must resonate with the experiences of sentient beings. The Buddha's Dharma can do that. Right view includes recognizing that all of us can genuinely cultivate ourselves towards liberation. Right view also means understanding karma, knowing that we alone are responsible for everything that happens to us, not blaming circumstances, other people, or anything outside ourselves. It means we are the masters of our karma, and only we can change our karma. Knowing that we can change is not enough, we must have the determination to change. These are the two correct views: understanding karma and the desire to change to escape suffering. It is not about changing the world we live in or the people around us, but changing ourselves. We cannot change the problem, but we can change our reaction to the problem. Additionally, we can gradually follow the entire Noble Eightfold Path to attain a right view of the self, which is no self. We need wisdom to practice spiritual principles. Without the wisdom to know what we need to do, we cannot practice meditation. Because of suffering, people have the opportunity to practice. Instead of always avoiding troubles, trying to push them out of our sight, or lamenting and feeling pain because of them, we should be grateful for them. They are our best teachers. Our only teacher, though unfortunately, not everyone learns from their teacher. There are many ways to deal with suffering. The first and most common way is to blame others. That is easy to do. Everyone to some extent acts like that, but it is a bit childish. The second way to deal with suffering and disappointment is to become depressed and wallow in suffering. The third way is to pity oneself, feeling like one is bearing the world's suffering. No one suffers as much as oneself, which is clearly not true. When we pity ourselves, we want others to suffer as we do. But it is futile. Acting that way only makes others uncomfortable and annoyed. Another way to deal with suffering is to grit our teeth, suppress our feelings, and pretend they do not exist. That also does not solve anything, because ignoring them does not resolve them. The fifth way is to look directly at suffering and say, "Oh, my old friend is here again. What will I learn this time?" That is right view. At that moment, we truly understand that the human realm is the best place for enlightenment. Suffering is our best teacher because it will grip us, immerse us in suffering until we learn something from it. Then, suffering will let us go. If we do not learn anything from that suffering, it will surely come back to us. For life is nothing more than a school for adults. If we do not pass a certain subject, we will stay there forever. Any lesson we miss, we will encounter it again. That is why we find ourselves repeatedly reacting the same way in similar circumstances. However, there will come a time when we realize that, and right view arises. I need to do something to change myself. I keep facing this problem over and over. Right view is the fundamental basis we must have to step onto the path. Initially, right view does not help us have a correct view of the self. That comes later. Fundamentally, right view relates to the first two truths of the Four Noble Truths. When we clearly see the truth that we are in a hopeless struggle if we keep demanding sensual pleasures and protecting our ego, we are on the path. That is when we step onto the path, and it is a wonderful moment. At that moment, we feel certain that we have found the path, and we are sure we will achieve the final result. It is just a matter of time. That feeling of joy is essential for meditation practice, and meditation is a prerequisite to walking the entire path. Each of us is a testament to the Buddha's teachings. We have suffering, desires, but we also have right view and can recognize our karma. We can change and learn from our past painful experiences. There are many ways to prove the Buddha's teachings if we observe carefully enough. That gives us confidence that we can reach the end of the Noble Eightfold Path. This confidence is essential for our practice. Confidence does not mean arrogance, it means independence. Each of us must find liberation for ourselves. The Buddha taught that we should not blindly follow his teachings, but should understand and experience them for ourselves. In the famous Kalama Sutta, the Buddha spoke about 10 reasons that prevent us from following the spiritual path. These can be applied to us today just as they were for the Kalama people back then. They are meaningful to us now as they were before. The Kalama people came to the Buddha when he visited the capital of Kesaputta, and they said to the Buddha, "Lord, many teachers have come to our city, each with teachings that make us believe. However, these teachers denounce and criticize each other. Now we are completely confused about whom to trust. We are very perplexed." The Buddha said, "Kalama people, it is right to have doubts and confusion." Then the Buddha taught them about the 5 precepts and asked them if they would be happy if they kept the 5 precepts and suffer if they broke them. The Kalama people agreed with the Buddha. Then the Buddha taught, "Never believe anything based on mere hearsay. nor on tradition, nor on rumor, nor on scripture, nor on surmise, nor on axiom, nor on specious reasoning, nor on bias towards a notion that has been pondered over, nor on another's seeming ability, nor on the consideration, the monk is our teacher. After hearing the Buddha's teachings, the Kalama people became his disciples. Those guidelines are still relevant today. Do not believe in something because it is traditional, or because everyone around us believes it, or because it is written in books. The Buddha said we should only believe after we have examined and recognized that it is beneficial and true. It is clear that we have found suffering within ourselves, and the more we turn inward to reflect, the more dissatisfaction we see. But when we no longer want to turn our personal suffering into joy only for ourselves, the conflict will disappear and suffering will pass. Accepting everything as it happens is also right view. The Brahmins, the priests in India at that time, did not like the Buddha because he threatened their livelihood. He taught that people did not need intermediaries between them and the divine to be happy, and offering incense to stone gods or giving flowers was useless. Since this was their way of making a living, while many Brahmins later became disciples of the Buddha, others harbored animosity towards him. One day, a Brahmin who hated the Buddha came to where the Buddha was teaching, walking back and forth in front of him. Then he used rude words to scold the Buddha. He accused the Buddha of teaching false doctrines, said the Buddha deserved to be banished, claimed the Buddha had broken up families because young men followed him to become monks, and that people should not support the Buddha. In short, he reviled the Buddha with all kinds of words. When the Brahmin finished his tirade, the Buddha, who had been sitting silently, said, "Brahmin, do you often have guests at your house?" The Brahmin replied, "Of course, I always have guests." The Buddha asked, "When you have guests, do you entertain them? Do you give them food and drink?" The Brahmin answered, of course, I give them food and drink." The Buddha continued, "So if they do not accept your kindness, if they refuse what you offer, to whom do those things belong?" The Brahmin said, "They are mine. They are mine." The Buddha said, "Exactly, Brahmin, when I do not accept what you offer, it remains yours." This is a story worth remembering. Any attack, anger, or threat belongs to the one who speaks those words. We do not have to accept them as ours. 2. Right thought. Right thought is the second part of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right thought is the result of right view. If there is wrong view, then right thought is impossible. Therefore, we must be careful with our thoughts. All thoughts are influenced by ego clinging. We see everything from the perspective of according to me, so even if our views are correct in worldly matters, in spiritual life, such conduct is not correct. However, we must start from what we have. We cannot wait for the day when our understanding improves. That day will never come if we do not begin to cultivate ourselves right now. Happiness and peace are not something we are born with. They are attained through persistent effort and practice. We must strive to always have right view, which leads to right thought. Right view and right thought are the wisdom parts of the Noble Eightfold Path. Before the Buddha's enlightenment, when he was still a bodhisattva, he constantly monitored all the activities of his mind, and he realized that when wrong views, anger, and desires arose in his mind, he was the one who suffered. But when he had thoughts of renunciation, compassion, and non-attachment, he was the one who benefited. From this, the Buddha trained his mind to the point where he could eradicate all wrong views. Right thought has 3 characteristics: renunciation, loving kindness, and non-attachment. We cannot have a mind of renunciation just by wishing for it or suppressing ourselves. Instead, we must use right view to think that desire only brings suffering. If we can realize this truth within ourselves, we will naturally let go of all arising desires, and we will do so joyfully, feeling light and comfortable when letting go of all afflictions and suffering. Desire always brings suffering because it only arises when we do not have what we want. It can be material or spiritual, it does not matter. But because it is something we do not have, we desire it, and thus we see this lack as suffering. When we do not get what we want, we become upset, desperate, and suffer. Clearly, we suffer because we do not get what we want. However, when we achieve what we desire, We are also troubled because from past experience we know that satisfaction and fulfillment cannot last. When we have it, we worry about how to keep it and maintain it. Worrying is suffering, and when we lose what we have, we also suffer. Trying to maintain something always brings tension and fear. For example, we fear losing loved ones, possessions, feelings, or favorable circumstances. Worrying about not getting what we desire is also suffering. When we realize this suffering within us, we can let it go. Attachment to people and things we do not want to be separated from causes us pain. There is nothing more painful than suffering until the day we ourselves must depart. If we do not see this truth, we cannot change. When we can give away something we cherish to someone else, we are truly practicing renunciation. If we can give joyfully, not gritting our teeth or closing our eyes because we do not want to see it go, we truly understand that clinging and attachment are suffering. But letting go of material things is not as important as letting go of our fixed views about the self, the world, and how those around us should live and behave, especially our loved ones. Attachment to possession and control is all suffering. Moreover, there is spiritual desire, such as the desire to be loved, to be a wife or mother, to be famous, to be appreciated. Any desire is suffering, hindering us from living happily and peacefully. Not accepting ourselves is also suffering. This is different from our effort to cultivate and gradually improve ourselves. The desire in our mind is the result of a feeling of lack, incompleteness, causing suffering. Only renunciation can end suffering. As long as there is desire, there is suffering. Within right thought lies the potential for renunciation, loving kindness, and non-attachment towards others, combined with the understanding of suffering's truth, guiding us to right thought. All four truths, four noble truths, intertwine as they penetrate deeply into our thoughts. If we understand correctly, we will act correctly. Our suffering is also the suffering of sentient beings, repeated over an unknown long period. For example, if we watch a bird, instead of admiring its beautiful feathers, its chirping, its ability to fly easily in the sky, going wherever it wants, let's look closer. The bird always looks around, turning its head right and left, fearing other animals might attack it or destroy its nest. At other times, for survival, it always has to search for food, and that is just one animal among many others. Observe the people around us, look at their faces. The Buddha advised us to know both the inner and outer worlds. That is mindfulness, awareness, and knowing. If we can see that all the people we interact with have suffering, we can infer without doubt that this is also true for all sentient beings everywhere. But if our mind does not fully believe this, it will be difficult to arouse great compassion. There will always be conflicting thoughts in our head. I do love her, but if only she didn't talk or act like that. Or I do pity her, but it's her fault she's in trouble. Such ways of thinking are unnecessary. We all suffer, but if we do not recognize this, our compassion and kindness will become intermittent. When everything is fine, we can endure. But when there is difficulty, we give up. Right thought means we must always be careful in our actions and skillful in our conduct. It cannot depend on our mental state or the actions of others. Right thought is the process of creating our karma when our consciousness is generating thoughts. Right view can be obtained through wisdom and mindfulness. It is the foundation of our thinking. Thoughts always arise with each action or reaction of ours. Karma, monks, I say, is intention, said the Buddha. That is how we create karma. And if we truly believe that good karma is essential for a healthy life, we must be careful with our thoughts. An interesting characteristic of thought is that it is like an iceberg. 1/3 is above water, but the other 2/3 are underwater. We can only see the part above. For example, when we give something, we think it is generosity, but do we really examine the intention behind that generosity? To understand ourselves, we must thoroughly explore our inner self. There are many corners in the human soul. We do not want to look at the truth because there are unpleasant things there. But that is because we are human, otherwise we would be in the heavenly realm. It is better to acknowledge our flaws. Only what is brought to light can be cleaned and improved. Dust under the mat will not be swept away unless we lift the mat. The Buddha compared our defilements to wet straw. If we store them in hidden places, they will rot. But if we bring them out to dry in the sun, they will dry and become usable. Let's look into the dark corners of our soul and carefully observe our intentions. The next 3 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path address ethical conduct: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. 3. Right speech. Speech is very important, and we must be mindful of our words. Just because we can use language does not mean we understand the art of conversation. The Buddha gave very profound advice about speech, which is worth remembering. If you know something is harmful and untrue, do not say it. If you know something is beneficial but untrue, do not say it. If you know something is beneficial and true, wait for the right time to say it. We must practice refraining from false speech. First, we need to think about the words we say, ensuring they are useful, truthful, and spoken at the right time. The right time is when the listener is calm and mindful. But most importantly, these words must come from our loving kindness. Only then should we speak. If there is even a hint of anger or aversion in us towards the listener, it will show in our words, making them ineffective. We often feel the need to tell others not to do certain things. When speaking, remember this advice to make our words more effective. Right speech is commonly understood as refraining from lying, gossiping, speaking harshly, or using divisive speech. The Buddha taught that speech can create enemies or friends, bring happiness to a family, or cause its breakdown. It is the root of deep friendship or enmity. The Buddha also said that right speech means not going to extremes, such as speaking too much or being overly silent, as both can be forms of lying. These behaviors stem from a desire to make ourselves seem more important. When Rahula, the Buddha's son, was 7 years old, the Buddha taught him about the importance of not lying, a lesson valuable for both children and adults. If it were not important for Rahula's education, the Buddha would not have mentioned it. The Buddha showed Rahula a small amount of water in a cup and asked, "Rahula, what do you see and hear?" The child replied, "I see a little water." The Buddha said, "The trust others have in a person who lies is as little as this." Then he poured out the water and said, "Now what do you see?" Rahula answered, "The cup is empty." The Buddha said, "Exactly, a person who lies is empty like this cup." Then he turned the cup upside down and said, "Rahula, what do you see now?" Rahula replied, "The cup is upside down." The Buddha said, "Right, the life of a liar is turned upside down like this." Lying is the first step to breaking all other precepts. People lie to protect themselves out of greed, to get more than they deserve, and sometimes out of anger to harm others. Speech relies on thought, so if we can control our thoughts, we can control our speech. We must be mindful of our thoughts, transforming them from impure to pure. If we cannot learn to restrain our speech, we will not have many friends. On the other hand, we must speak meaningfully. Idle chatter is also wrong speech. For example, talking just to talk about family, food, weather, or social niceties. Talking to pass the time. Unless we are mindful and aware of what we are saying, it is better to remain silent and reflect on our own mind. Right speech is one of the 38 blessings mentioned in the Great Blessings Discourse. It is a great blessing to speak kind, polite, meaningful, and truthful words. Two people can say the same thing with two different intentions, so their karmic results will be different. If we practice by observing our mind, we will gradually understand our intentions, but we cannot do this while speaking. The fourth precept of the 5 precepts, refraining from lying and false speech, must be reconsidered for its significance in our lives. If we truly choose to follow the Buddhist teachings, this precept must be prioritized. As everyone speaks all day, when we speak meaningful words, people will listen. When we speak kind words, others will be happy. When we speak polite words, we will have more friends. With truthful words, we will gain credibility. Without slander, we will be trusted. We can confide in others and share our difficulties or secrets. If we can become such a person, we will have many friends and a peaceful life, as we have nothing to hide. We will not worry about what we have said, how we said it, or whether what we said was true. Our speech will flow easily because it is backed by good intentions. The Buddha also spoke about teaching the Dharma. It must be precise, meaning we must know what we are thinking and feeling. This is very important. Anyone speaking the Dharma, even about their own meditation practice, must be precise. This means our mind must be clear, and then precise language can emerge. These are skills we can cultivate through mindfulness, not through lessons in eloquence. 4. Right action. Right action is also based on correct intention. If our intention is right, rooted in right view, then right action will follow. All actions generate karma for us because they are all the result of intention. Speech is based on intention, and so is action. All these generate karma, good, bad, or neutral, not only for the next life but also in the present moment. Karma and its results occur every moment. Unless we pay attention to the results, we will not know that they are related to what we have just said, thought, or done. With right action, we do not harm other living beings in any form, and we give up greed and hatred. We cannot suppress greed and hatred. They will manifest in one way or another. We need to have the mind to let them go through the practice of meditation. When we meditate, we must let go of all cravings, otherwise there will be no meditation. There will only be wandering thoughts, hopes, wishes, fears, and memories. If we do not let go of these states of mind, we will find it difficult to meditate. Meditation is about letting go of all the mind's distractions, self-concepts, and desires. Since we have not yet practiced letting go much, we find it challenging to sit in meditation, but gradually with practice, it will become easier. Trying to suppress them has no results, but letting go of the desire to think, remember, and plan will bring the best results. Letting go of desire is the only way to peace. And once we experience this, we will understand that letting go of desire in our daily life will bring us happiness. Right action can be practiced in all circumstances by anyone at any time, whether at home, at work, or in a place of practice. Wherever we are, whatever we are, we all must act. We can examine whether our actions are beneficial to others or ourselves. Even cooking or cleaning the house must be done with good intentions, not out of duty, request, or fear of others. The right reason to do it is because at a certain moment, it needs to be done with a purpose. By carefully observing and being mindful, we will gradually know our true intentions and perspectives in our actions. We will see the connection between body and mind without paying attention to external things. There will be no reluctance or resistance. We will do everything wholeheartedly. Only then will our actions bring results. People often think that work leaves no time for fun and entertainment. This is clearly a wrong view. It is entertainment that interrupts work. Whatever profession we are in, work is a means for us to feel useful and live with purpose. Work is a means to fully focus on the body, to know the conditions and origins of the body. Work is an opportunity to help, serve others, develop skills, and express love to others through service. There is no better means to purify the body and mind than through work. Not just working to earn a living or because others demand it, but doing everything with all our heart as a means to understand things more deeply. 5. Right livelihood. Right livelihood is one of the 3 aspects of ethical conduct. It means earning a living in a way that does not harm anyone. Each person must determine this for themselves. There are many ways of earning a living that can be considered right rather than wrong, but there are also livelihoods that are truly harmful. To evaluate, we can refer to the 5 precepts. If our livelihood violates one of these precepts, it is clearly wrong. Right livelihood is a crucial element in purification, because if we pursue a wrongful livelihood, we will become desensitized and bad habits will form. For example, a butcher in a slaughterhouse must numb all their emotions to continue with their job. If they do not, they will find it difficult to perform their work. Such a person becomes hardened, losing compassion for other beings. A livelihood that involves killing is very harmful. Lying, consuming intoxicants, stealing, all are dishonest means of making a living. Some people earn a living through wrongful sexual relations. Clearly, these livelihoods based on lust are not only harmful to the individual practicing them, but also cause suffering to others. They continue these actions by justifying and rationalizing their behavior. But that is their wrong view. While on the path, each step we take must be based on right view. 6. Right effort. Right effort and energy have a symbiotic relationship. With energy, we gain effort. Conversely, continuous effort increases energy. Energy fuels effort, and effort reciprocally fuels energy. Though effort might seem contrary to comfort, Prolonged meditation reveals that effort indeed brings about comfort. The Buddha taught the four supreme efforts as useful tools. These are called paramitas, perfections, because they are very useful and also very challenging to accomplish. Prevent unwholesome thoughts from arising if they have not yet arisen. Abandon them if they have already arisen. Cultivate wholesome thoughts if they have not yet arisen. Maintain and perfect them if they have already arisen. To achieve this, we must monitor our minds and discern between good and bad thoughts. That is why I encourage you to label your thoughts as they arise during meditation. Only by knowing what we are thinking can we take appropriate measures. We need to know whether our mind is occupied with unwholesome or wholesome thoughts. Such clear distinction enables us to practice the Buddha's teaching effectively. A lot of mindfulness is required to prevent unwholesome thoughts from arising, as it demands a deep awareness of underlying intentions. It is easier to deal with thoughts that have already arisen. Hence, we should start with these until we develop the ability to detect unwholesome intentions before they manifest, preventing them from arising altogether. In meditation, all thoughts are unhelpful because our aim is to meditate, not to think. Daily life, however, demands we rid ourselves of unwholesome thoughts. Trying to suppress them is unproductive. Instead, we should abandon them or replace them with wholesome thoughts. During meditation, we replace thoughts with focus on the meditation object. Our success in this endeavor reflects our practice of the four supreme efforts in daily life. Conversely, our daily practice of these efforts is reflected in our meditation. Unwholesome thoughts in daily life manifest as mental restlessness during meditation. When wholesome thoughts are nurtured and never stray, they bring peace and tranquility to the mind. If we remember nothing else from the Buddha's teachings, the four supreme efforts alone can suffice. While other teachings may inspire and uplift us, these four efforts directly guide us toward purification. Right view is necessary to recognize these tasks as essential, and diligent practice is required to accomplish them. Few people in this world are entirely free of unwholesome thoughts. Our world is full of turmoil and disorder because our minds are filled with such thoughts. It is not the skyscrapers, vehicles, or governments that shape our world, but our thinking process, which dictates whether there is war or peace, both internally and externally. Labeling our thoughts means knowing what we are thinking. This practice is best applied in meditation when we can clearly observe our mind's restlessness. Our thoughts can be unwholesome, wholesome, or neutral, confused, restless, anxious, fearful, envious, or completely clouded. Without this awareness, we cannot introspect or understand why we feel or act the way we do. The four supreme efforts are fundamental on the path, unlike external adornments like flowers, candles, bells, or temples. Prevent unwholesome thoughts from arising if they have not yet arisen. Abandon them if they have already arisen. Cultivate wholesome thoughts if they have not yet arisen. Maintain and perfect them if they have already arisen. This process purifies our thoughts and consequently our speech and actions. When this happens, our vision becomes clearer, like a clean mirror reflecting pure images. Effort is necessary in everything we do, especially in meditation. Even with diligent practice, we might not see immediate results. This can dishearten the mind, diminishing initial enthusiasm. When the mind demands immediate results, it leads to attachment, craving, and suffering. We often expect results from our actions and become disappointed when outcomes do not meet expectations. Effort for the sake of effort without clinging to results is essential. Right effort is a good deed, regardless of the outcome. In meditation, even without immediate results, the wholesome intention itself is a good deed. Right effort inherently benefits us, though we often overlook this, focusing instead on material rewards. I've tried so hard but still can't concentrate, or I've loved my children so much but they are ungrateful, or I've taken care of my aunt for so long yet she's never kind to me. This is a flawed perspective. The effort itself is the merit, it is the result. Regardless of what others say or the outcome, this is secondary. Sometimes we achieve concentration. Sometimes others appreciate our efforts, but these do not determine the effectiveness of our efforts. If we do not change our perspective, we remain dependent on results. Thus, our effort fluctuates with the outcomes. If effort is inconsistent, it is ineffective. Right effort must be steadfast. 7. Right mindfulness. Next is right mindfulness. If you have practiced mindfulness, you will understand what it means. When you place your foot on the ground and are aware only of that action, that is mindfulness. When you raise chopsticks to your mouth and are aware only of that action, that is mindfulness. This is very different from our daily actions, and if you do not recognize this difference, you have not truly practiced mindfulness. When you are completely mindful, you do not notice anything else. This is single-pointed focus. It helps you forget your troubles because you cannot think of two things simultaneously. This focal point, when applied to meditation, gradually leads you to concentration. In daily life, the practice of mindfulness helps you forget your troubles because they no longer occupy your mind. And in meditation, it helps you achieve concentration. Mindfulness can also help purify yourself. When you are fully aware of what you are doing, saying, or thinking, you become careful not to let your body, speech, and mind be controlled by instinctive, defiled actions. In this way, you achieve purification. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding about the term mindfulness. Mindfulness means always being aware. How can you rectify unwholesome actions if you are not aware of them? There are 4 foundations of mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, such as actions, movements, the 32 parts, postures, and physical appearance. Mindfulness of feelings, such as mental and physical sensations. Mindfulness of the mind, such as the process of thinking, knowing you are thinking, knowing the mind is active, knowing there are thoughts, and knowing the nature of thoughts. And finally, mindfulness of the objects of the mind, knowing whether a thought is defiled or pure. Traditionally, mindfulness of the objects of the mind involved examining whether parts of the 5 aggregates, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the Noble Eightfold Path, or the 6 sense bases were arising. But in practice, in daily application, this is too cumbersome. Most of us do not remember all the details to examine. Simply knowing whether a thought is pure or impure is sufficient. Also, it is difficult to practice all 4 types of mindfulness simultaneously. You can choose one during meditation. You might focus on the in and out breath or practice walking meditation, both of which involve contemplation of the body. Or you might focus on feelings caused by mental and physical processes. If you notice you are troubled by thoughts, that results from mindfulness of the mind. When you label thoughts and recognize them as love, hate, compassion, or anger, you are practicing mindfulness of the objects of the mind. Ultimately, in meditation, you choose where to place your focus. In daily life, it is different. You must focus on what is appropriate at the moment. For example, when crossing a busy street, focusing solely on your steps might not be the best way to stay safe. You need to pay attention to the traffic. In this case, mindfulness means being aware of what is happening around you. Or when talking on the phone, you cannot focus only on the receiver. You need to pay attention to your thoughts and the resulting conversation. Mindfulness involves focusing on what is reasonable at that moment. Mindfulness is a spiritual factor that can and should be practiced every waking moment. There are 24 hours in a day, and if all goes well, you might meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. You might sleep for 6 or 7 hours, leaving about 15 hours each day. If you do not remember to practice mindfulness during those 15 hours, you might as well forget about meditation and practicing the Buddha's teachings. If you do that, you are just good at talking and not practicing. When you continuously practice mindfulness, it becomes a habit, making your life less troublesome because mindfulness helps you avoid mistakes and missteps. Mindfulness is like the brakes on a car. Driving without brakes is incredibly dangerous. Living without mindfulness is equally perilous. You can easily collide with others, harming yourself and them. Practicing mindfulness does not mean becoming passive or reacting according to others' wishes. That is not mindfulness. That is yielding. Mindfulness means knowing clearly what you are thinking, feeling, and doing. Knowing this, you become more attentive to your reactions. You do not act according to others' desires, but focus on purifying yourself. Right effort, the 4 supreme efforts, can only succeed when accompanied by mindfulness. Moreover, all parts of the Noble Eightfold Path require the support of mindfulness. Mindfulness goes hand in hand with clear comprehension. Mindfulness is the knowing element, thoroughly illustrated in a Japanese haiku. Old pond, frog jumps in, splash. When a frog jumps into an old pond, many things happen. The water ripples, the frog disappears, and sunlight may shimmer on the pond's surface. All these are additional factors. Mindfulness focuses on the core, the essential point, which is the splash. That is all. That is the focal point. There is only knowing, with its companion of clear comprehension. Clear comprehension helps us know what is happening so we can use that knowledge. Clear comprehension has 4 parts: knowing the purpose, knowing whether the means are skillful, knowing whether the purpose and means align with the Dhamma, and knowing whether the purpose has been achieved. When we say there is no purpose, we have neglected mindfulness and clear comprehension. When we say there is a purpose but cannot articulate it, we lack skillful means. Clear comprehension helps us discern whether our body, speech, and mind align with the true Dhamma. If we do not achieve the desired result, it is clear we have not used skillful means. Mindfulness in speech and action requires clear comprehension, knowing the purpose, skillful means, adherence to the Dhamma. Living mindfully changes how we focus. We know what is happening but are not concerned with it. When anger arises, we know it is arising, but we do not need to become angry. That is a wonderful skill. When depression arises, we know it is arising, but we do not need to become depressed or despairing. We simply know the arising and passing away of all mental states. Mindfulness is for everyone. Anyone can use it for survival. But since struggling for survival is futile, it is better to use it for liberation and enlightenment. Mindfulness is a skillful means, and clear comprehension is the wisdom that helps us discern. Mindfulness does not judge, but clear comprehension includes discernment, allowing us to change direction if necessary. 8. Right concentration. When delving deeply into meditation, we can achieve right concentration, which the Buddha frequently mentioned in his teachings as a path and a means, rather than an end goal. Right concentration fundamentally requires the other branches of the Noble Eightfold Path. Without moral conduct, sila, right thinking, right view, and right effort, right concentration cannot be attained. Thus, right concentration is mentioned last. It is also the starting point for transforming an ordinary person into an enlightened one. Right view is placed first in the Noble Eightfold Path because without it, nothing else can occur. Right concentration is last because it requires all the other factors to form and provides the means to attain freedom. When right concentration is achieved and one has made efforts to reflect inwardly, right view becomes clearer. This is the right view of liberation. Ultimately, we complete the circle and return to the right view of self, which is non-self, anatta. We cannot find non-self. We cannot find what is not present. Therefore, we must always question and examine what we believe to be the self. We believe in the body, feelings, thoughts, and mental formations as the self. We need to re-examine all these constituents that are considered self. If we do not clearly understand the self we hold on to and do not control it, we cannot let it go. If I do not know where my watch is, if I do not have it in my hand, I cannot discard it. I can only do this when I know exactly what and where it is. If I look for the watch and cannot find it, I cannot do anything with it. The same applies to our self. The search is about the self. What is this body? Is it truly me or mine? If it is a corpse, is it still me? Are these feelings really mine? Why do they come when I do not wish for them? Why do I have thoughts that only cause me suffering? Who is suffering? Who is me? Is it the me of yesterday, today, or tomorrow? These questions continually seek to uncover what and where the self is. Ultimately, when I find it, I can let go of the illusion of it. In summary, to understand non-self, we must start with the self. When it becomes increasingly clear that it is merely a mistaken perception of self, it also becomes evident that our thinking process can change. All the factors discussed here are merely paths and means to lessen the attachment to the self, making it smaller. Concentration is an essential factor because when the mind is completely concentrated, there are no thoughts like, I am, I can, I will, I want, I do not want. When we meditate regularly, the self often diminishes, allowing us to see things more clearly. Conversely, if we do not cultivate concentration or mindfulness, our attachment to the self remains unchanged. The Noble Eightfold Path progresses from a relatively correct view to the absolute right view, eventually transforming a person into the embodiment of the Noble Eightfold Path. At that point, there is no need to practice the path consciously or strive to remember it. We do not need to labor over each step, as the Noble Eightfold Path has become our natural instinct. The Arahants always possess right view and right thinking. They do not engage in wrong speech, incorrect actions, or improper livelihood. Instead, they are always right in effort, mindfulness, and concentration. For us, it is a gradual process. Only through practice can we perfect the Noble Eightfold Path.